like. Hi everybody, I'm Crystal Haynes, and tonight on Greater Boston, tragedy in Duxbury is shining a light on the need for broader awareness of postpartum mental health problems and broader access to care for new parents. Plus, the playwright behind the Vagina Monologues joins me on her new memoir, Reckoning. And later, the Berkeley Indian Ensemble recently nominated for their first Grammy. The horrific murders of 3 young children in Duxbury who were allegedly strangled by their mother before she tried to take her own life has renewed important conversations about postpartum mental health. Conditions like depression, anxiety, PTSD, and rarely psychosis affect as many as 1 in 5 women during pregnancy or in the year after they give birth. That's according to the Maternal Mental Health Leadership Alliance. And 75% of people who experience those symptoms go untreated. And as is the case across the healthcare industry in this country, it's even harder for women of color to get access to affordable, timely treatment. So to break this down, to have a really good discussion about this, I am joined by Jamie Belsito. She is the founder of the Maternal Mental Health Leadership Alliance. She's also a former Massachusetts state representative. And Jessie Colbert. She is the founder and executive director of the Massachusetts PPD Fund. Thank you both so much for joining me this evening.
Crystal, thank you so much. Yes.
I think, as someone who works in this space, both of you, I mean, when you hear a story like Duxbury's, what goes through your mind?
Unfortunately, we've heard this story before, and my mind always goes to how old is the baby? How old are the children? How many children? Are we looking at something that I know very personally, and that is maternal mental health complications? We just shared the information with you that the MMHLA, of which I founded, based on my own lived experience, has identified. It's the #1 complication of pregnancy, maternal mental health issues, and how many women suffer silently. So when this tragedy came across, it's the 2nd time in Boston in 2 years that we're hearing this. And truly, again, it goes back to how old are the children. We know that this is a situation that is preventable, temporary, and treatable, and I will speak in the space of mental health, in maternal mental health, psychosis, which is the rarest and gravest of the disorders that we see in this space.
Jessie, you know, weigh in here. What went through your mind?
You just say to yourself, no, please tell me this isn't happening again. I think for those of us who work on this issue, it's been a mixture of having to take a moment to step aside and wondering whether we have to sound the alarm on this again, and it really being a call to action that we need to do so much better. So it's been a tough couple of weeks. I know it's been tough for advocates, survivors. You know, it really brings it home in a personal way, no matter how the issue presented themselves in their lives. And advocates just feeling like, you know, hoping that this outlives the news cycle. And of course, you know, our hearts going out to the family that's impacted.
And Jamie, I know you said that you went through this 3 times. Talk to me about your experience and where you think that things should have gone better for you and other women.
I do want to take a moment, obviously, to say prayers around the family.
Yeah, of course.
I'm trying to be very factual about the big challenge at hand, and that's that things are inadequate in this space. And I thank you, Jessie, for raising it. As a survivor, for lack of a better term, of postpartum, challenges of which I myself thought I would not make it through to the other side. And it was twice, it could have been 3 times. It was devastating both times. I felt to blame. I felt inadequate. I felt that I could not take care of my children. And I felt that if I sought help, Crystal, that I would be penalized. And that's a tough thing to swallow. This is the best time of your life. You have a healthy child. I am a white woman living in the suburbs of Boston, married, heterosexual, with a house and private insurance. I couldn't find any support systems, and that spoke volumes to me about if I can't find the support that I need. And this is 2010 and 2013, so a little bit in the rear view, but my phone rings constantly, and I'm sure Jessie could speak to the same, of women searching for support systems that for some reason don't exist. And we're still not talking about the elephant in the room, and that is, I felt alone. I happened to be 1 in 5. This is the #1 complication of all pregnancies.
Jessie, speak to that. You know, I'm sure that women are trying to find access to the appropriate care in this space, and they're having a hard time doing that.
Yeah, I think this speaks to it being what some people call a hot potato in the healthcare system. It's sort of nobody's problem. And I think it speaks to this real misalignment that the person who is carrying the weight needs to be the person to reach out just at that very moment where they're, are the least able to reach out. So that really speaks to one piece of addressing this, which is screening. And Jamie's organization, the MMHLA and the March of Dimes, have come out with some terrific new recommendations. All the big professional organizations have great recommendations around this, but is it really happening? We have some data. The latest data from Massachusetts says that about 22.9 docs are screening. So the screening needs to be repeated. It needs to be met with some, engagement, conversation, hand-holding to make for folks to make that way to care. So it really needs to be a system. You cannot tell by looking whether somebody is going through this. So there needs to be some system to catch mothers and other parents who are going through this.
And I know there has been a law, at least proposed, about screening at the pediatric appointments for moms. And I was thinking about that as I was researching that piece of it, in that the moms have to be screened at all of the well visits for the baby, and not necessarily through her healthcare provider, her gynecologist. And I'm curious about, or OB, and I'm curious about, is that a lack in the way we structure the appointments postpartum? I've heard many women who say they go to their 6-week or 8-week appointment, and then the doctor says, okay, you're all set, see you next time you have a baby.
I would concur that still is the way that the majority of appointments are going. And I hear that through my own family members, through friends. Being a mom, your mom, Jessie's a mom, we can talk about this, to just be screened at 6 weeks. I know for myself, my complete dire exasperation of, I've done my job, I've brought this baby into the world, it's okay for me to leave, came on 2 weeks into it. So 6 weeks is not enough, but I'll tell you whose appointment I was going to all the time was the 1 day, the 3 day, the 1 week, the 2 week, the baby's appointments. It's a mom-baby diet. It's a package, right? It's a parent package with the baby, and this is an opportunity for the pediatrician to understand it's one whole unit and to say, hey, how are you feeling? And did you know how common it is not to feel so great? Let's talk about the reality of that. And by the way, we have great resources here in Massachusetts, and we're going to help you.
So will that take a shift in sort of the healthcare system training of doctors? Because there are probably pediatricians watching this thinking, well, I'm focused on the little one.
I would say that the American Academy of Pediatrics has been forefront on this issue since 2015. I can speak to that from a federal standpoint. I worked closely with them at ACOG, American College of Obstetrics and Gynecologists, and making sure that through our federal legislature that we model what we have here in Massachusetts, and that's a telephone psychiatry access, so that you might not be versed in perinatal psychiatry, but you can pick up the phone and get those resources for your patient, for that mom, And Jessie and I both know there are so many support systems out there right now, and the database of that information is being managed by William James College through the MCPAP for Moms program that we've implemented here in Massachusetts.
I do want to, when we're talking about access, in the time that we have, and Jessie, I'd love for you to weigh in. We have some statistics on Black maternal health, which we know Black and brown women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die due to complications of pregnancy and childbirth. Access to postpartum care is also a big issue. We know that nearly 40% of these moms experience maternal mental health conditions twice. They are twice as likely to experience MMH conditions compared to white women, half as likely to receive treatment. And their maternal mortality rates, as I said, 3 to 4 times that of white women. So when we're talking about disparate outcomes and access, I think about how hard it would be for Black and brown moms to even get the postpartum care that they would need.
Yeah, I mean, there aren't enough mental health care providers. There aren't enough perinatal mental health care providers.
That's right.
And then if you're looking for culturally congruent care, there are even fewer. And I think there are a lot of practical barriers that can also influence the kind of care that moms get. So I think it's everything we're talking about and then some for Black moms and other moms of color. One effort that is going on right now here in Massachusetts is called the Moms Matter Act. And I'm lucky to be part of a steering committee that is pushing some legislation spearheaded by Rep. Fluker Oakley now and Senator Liz Miranda that would make some investment in increasing and diversifying the mental health workforce around perinatal mental health and also investing in community-based organizations. I think everybody can play a role. I think pediatricians can play a role. Our organization tries to make investments in community organizations and in providers because you don't know who has that trusting relationship with a parent, and this can be a sensitive issue. So I think the more people who are around that mom or that parent that have that trusting relationship that can understand how to identify this and what to do next, the more we can kind of catch people and get them to care.
Yeah, we're going to have to leave it there. We could talk hours about this, absolutely. Jamie Belsito and Jessie Colbert, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you or someone you know is struggling with maternal mental health issues, you can reach out to the National Maternal Health Hotline, Postpartum Support International, and the Massachusetts PPD Fund. Up next, more than a play, the Vagina Monologues opened up a national dialogue about women's reproductive health, sexuality, and sexual abuse. And in the years after it premiered back in 1996, it turned into a movement to stop violence against women. Now the playwright behind those monologues is telling an even more personal story. In her new memoir, Reckoning, V, formerly known as Eve Ensler, shares her nearly 5 decades of art and activism through a collection of her journals, poems, and other writings. And V joins me now.
VG.
VG, I was thinking Vagina Monologues. Thank you so much. This work, the Vagina Monologues, is so important to so many women and has been for decades now. What was it like writing a memoir about this?
Well, Reckoning is really a collection of writings that I've accumulated and over 45 years. And I think what happened during COVID is for those of us who were privileged enough not to be on the front lines in the hospitals and serving people, we were kind of locked in with our thoughts and our past and our nostalgia and our memory and our ghosts, and we're kind of like dealing with that as we had the world at our fingertips, which we were reckoning with, whether it was the incredible disaster of climate, fires burning in the West, or the George Floyd killing, which just was a diabolical public 10 minutes, which kind of ignited this national reckoning, or whether it was the reckoning with our infrastructure, where we saw how we didn't care about the health care of people in this country, particularly brown and black people who were dying at faster rates, and our healthcare workers, who we were sending nurses in with garbage bags, right, as uniforms, and using masks. And I think there was so much happening in that period that was about reckoning, both personal reckoning inside myself, but reckoning with the external political situation, and they seem somehow very much in sync with each other. So I decided to kind of put my writings together under that kind of title or that umbrella to see if they could be my offering to the kind of national reckoning that I hope will continue despite the pushbacks we're seeing now from the fringe right wing, which doesn't really want this country to move forward, and sees that we're finally having this reckoning and is now going to end African studies, American studies in Florida, and ban books and kill off critical race theory, and basically try to stop this momentum of reckoning, which is so critical to the future of this country.
Does that tend to be your process when you are feeling, when you are experiencing, you write?
It's how I've survived, without a doubt. I think when you grow up in a very violent home, you have to find methods of survival. And some people shut down, some people become violent. I learned early on that if I could write, I could try to make meaning or make something out of the madness that I was feeling inside. And I think, some people write because they want to write. I write because I have to write. It's been a process of survival.
Do you find, when you wrote the Vagina Monologues and, perhaps its first run, did you think it would touch as many people as it has sitting here today?
Oh, God, no. I just, I always joke, the first time I performed it, I just prayed I wouldn't be shot. It was more just getting through it and not, and surviving. I had no idea. I mean, look, I had been a playwright for quite a while before that, and I was writing plays about homeless people and nuclear war, so you can imagine I wasn't a terribly popular playwright. So to write a play about vaginas, I assumed it would kind of secure my downtown status as a playwright. And that play was just amazing what happened. From the minute I started to perform it, women would line up after the show to tell me their stories. And I thought, oh, this is going to be wonderful. I'm going to hear great stories about sexual satisfaction and people's really desires. And in fact, 90% of the women were lining up to tell me how they'd been battered or raped or incested or cut. And it was so overwhelming. It was so devastating that I was either going to stop the show or I was going to find a way to use the play to end violence against women, trans, and non-binary people. And that's when we started V-Day 25 years ago.
Do you think that the person you were who wrote the Vagina Monologue and had it premiere back in the 1990s, could the same person you are today write that piece?
That's a good question. I think it's really good when we're younger that we don't know what we're doing on some level, because you kind of have a brashness and a boldness that propels you to take risks. I still take a lot of risks, but I have much more consciousness, and the world has changed a lot.
Yeah.
The world is much more canceling, judgmental. You're always circumventing landmines. Before there was a kind of welcoming of new ideas and welcoming of dialogue and welcoming of, let's be in this discourse. We may disagree, but now things are very polarized and positional. It's harder. But I would certainly write the same play again. I mean, I sadly, I always hope the play will become outdated, right? And in fact, since COVID, I write about it in the book. I talk about disaster patriarchy, which is loosely based on Naomi Klein's concept of disaster capitalism, where a disaster occurs and people move in to exploit that disaster to move their own agenda forward. I think COVID has been disaster patriarchy because the pushback against women's rights all around the world, whether it's the fact that so many women were locked up with partners who were violent, and they had no recourse or place to go, whether it was the fact that children all around the world have stopped going to schools, right? And so now they're going to be pushed back and their rights are going to be disabled, workers' rights. Right. It's been a very rough time for women.
Well, Reckoning is the memoir, and I know many folks are excited to read it. V, I want to thank you for your time.
No, thank you.
The book again is Reckoning. Finally, over the past decade, the Berkeley Indian Ensemble has been studying and creating music influenced by Indian culture. Under the leadership of founder Annette Phillip, the group has collaborated with artists from all over the world, producing music that almost defies categories, everything from classical Indian music to reworkings of Metallica. Last fall, the ensemble released its first album, which was soon after nominated for a Grammy. GBH's Arun Roth sat down with Annette Phillip to talk about this ensemble and the surprising way she got her start.
That was amazing.
I just assumed, I'm stereotyping you, because like your background. I mean, I've seen you play piano tons, but I just assumed that you started off with Indian classical music and then went to fusion. So it was the other.
It was the other way around.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what was tell us a bit more then about your musical background before Berkeley.
Sure. So my family was living in Singapore, and I got hooked to this show, and I didn't know who it was. It was Luciano Pavarotti, turns out, with a pianist. And I just got mesmerized, and I would do air piano, table piano all day. And my parents are not musicians, but they observed that penchant for, whatever this mysterious instrument was, and enrolled me in piano lessons, and that's where it began. And then in Singapore, so I also picked up the trumpet and the recorder besides playing piano, and I used to sing at home, sing in church. When I came back to India as a teenager, that's where someone discovered me. My music teacher at school, Sir Samuel, discovered that, oh, you can sing, like sing. And then from there, jazz, a cappella, creating my own performing arts collective, and also being a professional, voiceover and recording and performing artist. That's where the Berkeley idea came in. Could I go to Berkeley for a semester or two and just get some experience, some exposure? And then the rest is history. Before I, graduated, I got this faculty position. And through the faculty position, my first blank canvas gift from Berkeley was, if you could create anything that would expand us as an institution and expand our offerings, but also our community, what would you do? And it was clear there was no performing ensemble that explored Indian music in all its forms. And 11 years later, here we are.
Was the intention from the beginning for it to be as much fusion as it is, as much like, it's the Indian ensemble, but the music is just wonderfully taking in from all traditions.
Right. I think the intention was first and foremost to create a space that was porous artistically, and that would allow for a confluence of cultural flavors to play together. If you can design a playground that is safe for musicians from many parts of the world, and you still have a thread, a common thread, and the common thread is Indian music in all its forms. So what's going to happen when you have a safe space and you get along with each other, you spend time outside of music making to just get to know each other, and food is a big part of that. What happens when people feel like they are seen and heard and that what they have to say is important? I think beauty happens and surprises happen, and delicious, scrumptious, artistic things come together.
So the ensemble has been together more than 10 years now. Mm-hmm. Tell us about how it's changed. I have to imagine with the permeability that you're talking about, there's probably been some evolution over the last 10 years.
Absolutely. We've had 450 musicians be part of this family from 54 countries, I think is the current count. And I think what is different about the Berkeley Indian Ensemble is that very quickly, within the first 2 or 3 semesters, the students understood that this was not something that they joined for a grade. This was a community. This was a family. People reached out and said, you know, when I first heard this arrangement, I knew I had to be in this class. I had to be in this group. And so what's been really wonderful is that ever since we started creating videos, we realized that there was such a huge global, loyal fan base for this music, which we didn't know existed. And we are currently at 280 million views. And that's, you know, I mean, it's dumbfounded. You know? This is the debut album of the Berkeley Indian Ensemble. It's called Shuruat, which is Hindi for beginning. It is a commemorative album, so it commemorates our first 10 years as an ensemble, as a family, and it has 10 tracks for the 10 years. The single we released is called Sundari Penne. It's in Tamil, which is a South Indian language. And we featured Shreya Ghoshal, who is arguably India's most prolific and beloved female Bollywood singer of all time. She is just an incredible artist with an unbelievable instrument, but also someone who's really open to experimentation. And she came in 2017 and just did this amazing residency with us and was game to join us in us experimenting and really deconstructing her songs. And so the song Sundari Penne is a progressive rock meets semi-classical, semi-Indian classical music.
It's been so awesome talking with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aaron. My pleasure, and thank you for making time for us.
That's it for tonight, but come back tomorrow for Talking Politics. Adam Riley and his panel will look at the relatively quick passage of sports betting in this state, while so many other issues can't seem to get traction in the state legislature. Plus, what would the end of New Hampshire's first-in-the-nation primary status mean for Massachusetts? That and more tomorrow at 7. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Crystal Haynes. Have a good night.